Going into 2021, I never would have predicted the Raiders to be in the position that they're in. They're struggling to make the 8, let alone make the top 4, which is where I thought they would be. Honestly, I actually had the Raiders being a contender for the premiership. And look at them now. They are nowhere near it. They are so far off it. Now, obviously, only Melbourne and Penrith are a real contender in my opinion. Maybe even Manly at a stretch. But the Raiders, I definitely thought they'd be up there. In fact, I thought they might have even been in Manly's position where they were sort of the team that weren't really up with Melbourne or Penrith, but the team that could also give them a lot of trouble and maybe on their day could get the victory over them. Instead, in 2021, they've ended up the side that is struggling to beat teams like the Bulldogs. And I think that really says a lot about the Raiders in 2021 as well as the Raiders going forward. I think they're in a lot of trouble, and that's why we're titling this video The Downfall of the Canberra Raiders. Now, for most of my videos, I sit here and I talk and I try to one take it as much as I can, but for this one, I think we're going to be breaking up a little bit. We're going to be looking at some of the lineups, we're going to be looking at a few different things, so it's not going to be the normal sort of video for me. And that's just because the Raiders are in such a weird situation. It's not a normal situation that NRL teams are in. Usually teams do have ups and downs, but not so much like the Raiders, and there's a lot of controversy around the Raiders at the moment. Obviously, the whole George Williams situation. If you're unaware of what's happening with George Williams, now, he's been homesick, and for the last couple of months, there's been a lot of talk about him getting released to go home to England, and I think a lot of it stems due to the fact that his wife is pregnant and they want to go back to England, and obviously the whole COVID situation. I think before he even signed, the COVID stuff hadn't really taken off, so obviously a lot has changed since then, and he's played one season in the NRL, and I'm pretty sure in the off-season he was asking to be released from the Raiders to go back home. They denied it, and then all of a sudden, just last week, they just effectively immediately released him. And that comes off the back of the John Bateman situation last year, which was very, very similar in terms of him wanting to go home because he's homesick, and then a lot of stuff leaking to the media. So there's definitely a lot of discontent at the Raiders. Joseph Tapani's wife or girlfriend came out and made some comments about the Raiders as well. So there are people talking to the media and also talking even just in public and Instagram and that sort of stuff, releasing a lot of information that shouldn't be out in the public. So if you're looking at the results and you're looking at the actual performances of the Raiders, you're looking at them and you're going, yeah, they're not playing great, but you don't think too much of it. But because of all the other stuff, you start looking into it, you start looking like, is there something more happening at the Raiders? There's a couple of guys homesick, and they've had a lot of English guys for a lot of years now. Think back to 2016, I think was the first influx of players. Josh Hodgson, Elliot Whitehead, a few others as well have been there throughout the years, even like guys like Ryan Sutton and such. And now the George Williams situation, and it all becomes very, very messy because like mental health and a lot of that stuff is being brought up, and the fact that he sort of claimed that the Raiders have just tossed it to the side and just released him, haven't really cared. So it is getting very, very messy, but we're not really going to talk about this issue in a sense, but we are going to talk about it, but it's not going to be the main point of this video. We're going to be talking about the decline as a whole of the Raiders club in the last couple of years, because they've literally gone from a grand final team in 2019 to in 2021 mid-season just a total shit show. And yes, I'm going to point out the elephant in the room. There's been a lot of injuries. There's been a lot of rule changes since 2019. So, it might be natural, the fact that they have sort of regressed a little bit, and it did happen in 2016 too. In 2016, they were a top 4 side. They nearly made the grand final. I think they made the prelims. They got very unlucky. Obviously, didn't go on to it, and the Sharks ended up winning it, and there was a lot of controversy with Edric Lee. All he had to do was catch the ball, put it over the try line, Raiders win, go to the grand final. Who really knows what happens? Obviously, it didn't happen, but the next 2 years were followed with very disappointing performances, and they ended up missing the 8 both these years, and then all of a sudden, 2019 comes, and boom, Raiders are back to form. And the funny thing is, most of the players who played in that grand final side are still at the club. And obviously, it's an aging roster. There's a lot of players who, they're still at the club, but they're not playing first grade week in and week out because they've got a lot older or they're injured. So there's been a lot of injuries in the Raiders this year. So I'll give them a pass mark on that, but just in terms of the actual performances, still not good because they've recruited quite well. Harry O'Norris came to the Raiders. I know obviously John Bateman leaving is a huge hole in the side. In 2019, he got Player of the Year, pretty sure, or he got second row of the year for sure, I know that much. And then obviously him leaving is a huge hole to fill. And even last year when he didn't play at the start of the season, then he came back into the side, that's when the Raiders ended up being a force. They ended up making a push for the finals. They didn't get top 4, but they got 5th, and they got very, very close, and they ended up getting to the prelims, and they got very, very close to winning the premiership. I mean, they didn't get runners-up like 2019, but they were still there and amongst it. So they definitely were in the talks, and I feel like the whole season, everyone was waiting for the Raiders to explode, and that's kind of what they did coming into the finals. Whereas in 2021, it's just not happening. Nothing is happening. Like I said, they struggled to beat the Bulldogs, and I think that really says it all for the Raiders at the moment. And yes, this whole George Williams situation is definitely going to be playing playing a part. Adding Josh Hodgson's another one who's gone from being probably the best player in the side, probably the star of the side, the guy who ran the show, and then all of a sudden he's not really getting played and he's getting benched, and you got Tommy Starling there. Jared Kroger's another one who's been around for a long time, captain of the club, and it seems to me that they're sort of saying he's injured so they don't have to drop him. Kind of like a respect thing, but at the same time, it is going to cause a lot of disharmony, the fact that your captain isn't really good enough to be in your starting side. And let's be honest, Jared Croker isn't really good enough to be in their starting side at the moment. They've got some pretty decent centers. They've got Curtis Scott there. They've also got Sebastian Chris coming along as well. Adding a lot of youngsters there, and I don't really know what Jared Croker offers that they don't, apart from maybe goal kicking. So in that sense, there's not a lot that's actually wrong with the Raiders in the sense of player selections and all that sort of stuff, because Tom Starling, I think, offers a lot more than Josh Hodgson at this point in his career. Hodgson definitely doesn't look up to pace since his injury, but at the same time, they've chucked him in at lock at times, and I thought he looked really good there. And I think he still can be a fantastic hooker. He's just still coming back from an injury, so it made sense that Tom Starling was getting the start, but it seems to just have created a lot of disharmony in the side. Hodgson stood down as captain. Jared Croker's obviously not in the side due to injury / just being dropped, and the rest of the side as well. It's just, I don't really know what's happening with the Raiders, and no one can really put their finger on it, but I just wanted to take a look at the decline over the years, because like I said, they were a grand final side in 2019, and people were expecting a big future from them. Even at the start of the season, I thought the Raiders were going to be a top 4 side pushing for a premiership, and then just to see how far they are now, and just all of the controversy happening at the moment and how things are being handled, it's been handled very, very poorly. So I had to do a video on this. So I felt it wasn't right for me to just cover the George Williams situation. I wanted to look at the Raiders as a whole over the last couple of years and see where their ups and downs have been. So I've touched on it a couple times throughout this video, but through Ricky Stewart's reign at the Raiders, they've had some good moments, they've had some bad moments. So 2016, they made the top 4, they nearly made the grand final, nearly even won a premiership, and obviously that didn't happen, and I think people expected them to come out the next couple of years and absolutely fire, and it didn't really happen. And then for me, I remember sort of writing off the Raiders, and then all of a sudden, Jack White moves to 5'8", and the Raiders come alive again, and they end up making the top 4, and they end up making the grand final in 2019, taking on the Roosters. Obviously, a very controversial clash. The Roosters end up picking up the victory, but the old 60-game call and sort of how it changed the game. There's a lot of controversy behind it, and a lot of people believe that the Raiders would have actually went on to win a premiership. But due to the fact that they were actually so good and competed so well with the Roosters, who were quite dominant that year, I think a lot of people expected 2020 to be the year for the Raiders, maybe even 2021. Obviously, in 2020, it didn't happen. Penrith were so good. Melbourne were very, very good. Obviously, won the comp. Roosters were pretty good as well. The Raiders were a good side, but they were a good side with a bunch of other good sides as well. And even so, they got to the prelim finals, didn't make the top 4. They ended up in 5th position, but they still competed very, very hard to make the top 4, and they had to deal with Josh Hodgson, who wasn't there for most of the season as well. They did a fantastic job, and I was expecting big things in 2021, but all of a sudden, just the results weren't there. The results definitely weren't there. And to be honest, everything said that the Raiders should have gone better this year. I mean, John Bateman left, but we already knew he was leaving. Signed Corey Harawira. Ryan James came across from the Titans, who was their former captain. The only real player that I can think of that left last season was Nick Kotrick, but that's a winger. You can replace wingers. Obviously, they're going to be a big loss, but they're not going to be the biggest loss. Plus, there's plenty of other players who have left. Like I said, John Bateman left. Joey Leilua left. Rapana even left, but he came back. There's been players who have left the Raiders. Very, very good players too. So the fact that they have the core squad from the grand final still playing in 2021, I mean, it's only 2 years later, so it's not exactly crazy that they still got the same sort of squad going around. I think it says that there's something behind the scenes going on, and obviously there's a lot of drama going on at the moment, so it does suggest that there is situations going on behind the scenes. But honestly, I feel like this is Ricky Stewart to a T. Seems to happen with him a lot. At the Roosters it happened, made a couple grand finals, things went to shit, he ended up getting sacked. At the Sharks, he started off very strong, didn't make any grand finals, but they'll be a fairly consistent side. All of a sudden, he gets the sack because it just goes to shit. He goes to the Eels, clears out all those players, leaves 1 year later due to personal reasons, goes to the Raiders, and things seem to be on the same track as what the Roosters and the Sharks were. And just to prove my point in terms of the 2019 roster being fairly similar to the 2021 roster, I've actually got the lineup from the grand final in 2019. You'll be able to see on the screen right now the amount of players who are still there. It's actually ridiculous. They've only lost 4 players in terms of the team that fielded in 2019 to what they can field in 2021. Now, take into account injuries and players getting older and aging and that sort of stuff, form as well, there's obviously not going to be the exact same lineup, but for the most part, if everyone's fit and firing, that could be a very, very similar lineup. Now, obviously, you're looking at that 2019 lineup and you're thinking, but that's not really what they're putting out in 2021. I know what you're saying. There's been a lot of injuries, like Chan's got injured very, very early on. Hodgson's been in and out of the side. Whiten's been suspended. That's another thing. A lot of suspensions as well. And like I said, a lot of people who are aging. So you guys like Sia Soliola and stuff, who were very, very good, they were already aging in 2019. And the fact that they're still in a first grade squad in 2021, don't know if that's a credit to him or says something about the Raiders. But yeah, it's a very, very different lineup going into 2021. In round 12, this is what their lineup actually looks like. You can see there's only like a handful of players who are still in the side. Simonson, who was a bench player in the 2019 season. Rapana left and came back. Jack Whiten is back, but he's been out for a little bit with suspensions. Dynamis Louis, he was a bench player at the time. Same with Gula. You've also got Whitehead, who's probably the star of the forward pack, and he's still there. But Josh Hodgson has moved to the bench. Soliola's there. Look, some of the players that they've got playing, yes, they're still there, but they're not exactly the same side as 2019. So I think we look back at that 2019 side, even 2020, and we look at them and we go, yeah, I mean, they were so good, and it's basically the same side because a lot of their guys are still in the squad. But the team that they're putting out in 2021, week in, week out, is definitely nowhere near the standard of 2019. And I think in terms of where they are on the ladder, it kind of reflects the side that they're putting out. Now, by no means am I saying that they should be as low as what they are. I think a lot of the players that they've brought in as well were just due to the fact that they had better players than what they had in 2019. You got you guys like your Hudson Youngs, your Haru Anaris, even George Williams when he was first signed. He was an upgrade on Aiden Caesar for sure. There's a lot of guys who have been brought in as upgrades to players who were already in that side in 2019. Even adding guys like Ryan James who offer a lot of experience. This side is by no means a bad side, and it shouldn't be as low as what it is, but it also shouldn't be as high as what I was sort of expecting as well. So, because like I said, I think we look at 2019, look at 2020 with how they finished, and we think, yep, top four, and I don't really know what's happening because they're not anywhere near the top four. But I think, as you can see with the lineups, it's definitely nowhere near the caliber, and like I said, it does fit where they are on the ladder at the moment. So, in that sense, I do feel sorry for the Raiders because there's a lot of controversy going around at the moment, adding that their lineup isn't exactly great, even in terms of all the rule changes. I don't know if they necessarily are a good side or a good fit for these rule changes, but look, they still got enough good players in that side to still be competing with some of the better sides, and they take on the Roosters this week. You could be looking back at this video and be saying, wow, what a great victory from the Raiders, or you could be looking at it and saying they got absolutely towed up by the Roosters. I don't really know at this stage, and that's sort of how the Raiders are this season. Games that they should be winning, they aren't winning. Games that they are losing, they are sort of winning or competing, so they're very unpredictable at the moment. But in terms of this video, I thought it'd be fun to just take a look back at the Raiders, and that's exactly what we've done. I thought it just sort of reflects in the NRL in terms of the salary cap and stuff, because apart from the Roosters and the Storm, every team has their premiership window, and I did a video last week talking about the Rabbitohs sort of being at the end of their premiership window. I think the Raiders are definitely at the end of theirs. I think theirs is already slammed shut, and it is something that does get talked about a lot, sort of cliched at this point, but it's cliched for a reason because I think it is very, very true, and we can see this with the Raiders. The Raiders went from being a premiership threat to being a premiership contender to all of a sudden being a top 8 contender, maybe not even a top 8, and all of a sudden they're closer to the wooden spoon than they are even a top 8 spot at this moment. Also, this week in particular is quite interesting because they're taking on the Roosters, who's the team that beat them in the grand final in 2019. And that's what we keep going back to, the 2019 grand final. That's where they peaked. That's where they got the closest to winning a premiership, obviously, and maybe even just a controversial call in the game saw them not win a premiership. But you look at the Roosters side, and even they don't really have a team that resembles anything near the 2019 side, and yet they're traveling fairly well considering all the injuries, all the suspensions they've got. They've got a billion injuries and suspensions, and to key players as well, even adding guys who've retired since that 2019 grand final. You lose Cooper Cronk, and the Roosters are still a bit of a force in the NRL these days, while the Raiders, they've just gone downhill, and that's exactly why I called this video the downfall of the Canberra Raiders. It just had to be said and it had to be talked about, and I didn't want to do a video just talking about George Williams in particular because a lot of the stuff is just hearsay, she say, and we don't really know what's happened. So I thought I'd talk about the Raiders as a whole because I don't think they've handled this situation great, and like I said, Ricky Stewart kind of has a history of having clubs go like this. They start off very strong, and then all of a sudden it just goes to shit. And I don't know if it's because he's so strict or just his coaching style, or maybe he's just got unlucky. I don't really know, but that is the history of Ricky Stewart, so it had to be brought up. Anyway, guys, leave in the comment section below, what are your thoughts on the Raiders situation at the moment? Do you think George Williams has been dudded? Personally, I think he has, but he also hasn't, because he was asking for a release for ages, and it's just the fact that they've given him a release straight away. So in that sense, it's like he's been asking for a release, and then they've given him a release, and he's like, hang on, actually, I want to play to the end of the season. So it's like, you're either homesick or you're not. If you're homesick, they've released him, he can go home. So I understand that, but it's more so just the way they've gone about it. It seems like he just sort of had mental health problems and he's asked for a bit of help and they've went, stuff you. Well, at least that's the painting he's pictured anyway. So we'll just have to go with what he says, and also the Raiders coming out and saying it as well. So it is hard to sort of figure out who's telling the truth, and it's probably somewhere in the middle. So leave in the comment section below, what are your thoughts of the Raiders situation? What are your thoughts on their decline? Because they definitely declined big time. And like I said, a lot of it is due to injuries and suspensions and aging rosters and such, but they have made some good signings in the last couple of years too, which sort of reflects that they should have been a lot higher than what they are. So yeah, like I said, comment section below, let me know what are your thoughts on the Raiders. Now, if you happen to enjoy this video, make sure you go ahead and leave a like on it, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and turn on the notification bell. Pretty important in terms of you actually seeing the video, because sub boxes, they're quite dodgy, so don't rely on that. Rely on the notification bell pretty much. So you'll get a notification straight away. It'll tell you that I've uploaded, so use that. Also use social media as well. Give me a follow on it. It's on the screen right now. It's Mr. Luke and YT for the most part, so go ahead and give me a follow. It's Mr. Luke just for Facebook, but for everything else, it's Mr. Luke and YT. So go ahead, give me a follow, give me a like, give me an ad, do that sort of stuff. And that's how I'm going to end this video. Stay tuned for more content on the channel. I might even do a video where I use the Raiders on Rugby League Live 4 or something in the near future. So we'll see how that goes. But like I said, stay tuned for more content on the channel, and I'll see you for the next one. See yous.